One of the most critically and commercially successful franchises of all time is The Legend of Zelda. Gamers all over the world have fallen in love with the series for its deep lore and fun gameplay. I'm a longtime fan of the series and have been wanting to do a Zelda video for a while now. I've noticed that there's a lot of Zelda Icebergs out there, but they only focus on one title or only focus on fan theories, nothing that encompasses the series as a whole. So that's why I decided to make this, the ultimate Zelda Iceberg. This goes over everything from the games, to lost media, to trivia, to related media, as much as I could fit in. This is going to be quite the journey, so sit back, relax, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell as well for notifications on future videos, and enjoy the ultimate Zelda Iceberg. Hyrule Historia, a book that was released alongside Skyward Sword. The most notable things about this book is that current series producer Eiji Aonuma and series creator Shigeru Miyamoto authorized it, so the content within is canon. It shows off a lot of information and lore about the series, as well as cool stuff like concept art. One of the most important things about the book is that it answers the age-old question of the Zelda timeline, something that has mystified fans for years. The Zelda timeline. The longest debate in the Zelda fandom, the timeline. Fans have been trying to piece together the chronological order of the Zelda games. The general consensus was there was a few games before Ocarina of Time, but majority of the series occurred after that title, with the timeline going into two directions. This still didn't answer everything. Not helping was Nintendo's vague answers on the situation. Thankfully, Nintendo cleared that up in 2011 with Skyward Sword and Hyrule Historia. Nintendo clarified there are three timelines that spawn from Ocarina of Time: a child timeline, an adult timeline, and a timeline where the hero fails in his mission. Nintendo has had the timeline drafted up since 2003, but only announced it in 2011, and while some people aren't completely satisfied with the timeline, time to face facts, boys, this is canon. CDI games, the unholy trinity. 3 CDI games are infamous for their quality. Just the concept of 3 Zelda games not made by Nintendo for a system that's not Nintendo just sounds ridiculous, but here we are. And to no one's surprise, all 3 games are Anus. Most people know Wand of Gamelon and The Faces Are Evil for their hilariously camp art style and crap voice acting and roles in YouTube poops. This was a dark time, but there was still hope in the world back then. Zelda's adventure wasn't as memorable, but that's probably for the better. Even if the games didn't have bizarre presentations, the games would have still flopped due to their crap controls and level designs, and being on the Philips CDI, a system that flopped. To this day, Nintendo absolutely refuses to acknowledge anything from their Philips partnership, but the CDI games will always be remembered for the memes. Soul Calibur 2. Soul Calibur 2 started the trend of adding guest characters to the series. The PlayStation 2 version had Heihachi, Xbox had Spawn, and GameCube had Link. The addition of Link in Soul Calibur 2 was a very smart move from Namco, as the GameCube version of that title actually outsold the other versions of 2, which made it all the more baffling that Soul Calibur 3 was a PlayStation 2 exclusive. I was at the Soul Calibur 3 finals in Albuquerque back in 2005, and I saw that game die before my very eyes. Soul Calibur 2 would eventually get an HD release, but it would skip the Wii U, leaving Link stuck on the GameCube version of 2. It's a shame Namco didn't port Soul Calibur 6 to the Switch. It would have been really awesome to see Link in a traditional fighter again. Link speaking. The CDI games and the cartoon aside, Link rarely speaks in the games. He does say "come on" in Wind Waker, and a few cutscenes does imply he talks, but you don't actually hear any speaking from Link himself. So why does Link always scream?
I think he's trying to say somebody kicked him really hard in the balls, and now all he can do is that high-pitched squealy noise.
Origin behind the Triforce. The Triforce is the iconic logo behind the Zelda franchise. So where did it come from? It came from the Hojo clan, which was a powerful warrior clan in the Sengoku era of Japan. Americans hate Tingle. Tingle is one of the most polarizing characters in Zelda, if not gaming as a whole. He's popular in Japan, but America hates the bastard, probably stemming from how integral he was in Wind Waker and being a part of the worst part of that game, where you needed to spend an insane amount of rupees to get his maps. Plus, in general, he always comes across as a little bit of a pedophile, and people really don't like that. It's to the point where Tingle's games were never localized, and Sakurai is saying that Tingle would never be playable in Smash due to how hated he is in the West. Breath of the Wild sequel was originally DLC. According to developers, they were planning for more DLC to Breath of the Wild, but their ideas were so great they opted to make a full-on sequel to the game, Master Quest. If you pre-ordered Wind Waker, you got a bonus disc that had Ocarina of Time and a remixed version of Ocarina called Master Quest, which changed the dungeon layouts. The Master Quest dungeons were later included in the 3DS version of Ocarina. A bit of Z-Man trivia here. My first time playing Ocarina of Time wasn't the base game, it was Master Quest. My friend had the pre-order disc, but he didn't know how to take care of his games, so only the Master Quest version worked. Like, bro, how do you have your games in that bad of condition? You just leave them in the case, that's it. Cadence of Hyrule. A surprise release from Nintendo and indie developer Brace Yourself Games. This is a Zelda rhythm game for the Switch. Never played it, but looks cool. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. The thing the old man says to you when you get the sword in Zelda 1. For a single line of dialogue, it left an impression to the point of having its own Wikipedia article. It's a secret to everyone. Another famous line from Zelda 1. In certain holes, you can find moblins who give Link rupees while saying this line. In the Japanese version, they say they are bribing Link to leave them alone, but that didn't get translated well into English. The weird phrasing on this line made this line insanely memorable. Ganon Band. An infamous website that would roast people over misconceptions of the Zelda series, such as the Ganon typo in Zelda 1. There was even once a trope named after it on TV Tropes. The site is no longer up, but the memory remains. Don't worry, we'll get around to the individual Ganon Band points later. And for the record, Ganon with 2 N's was just a typo. EGM April Fool's prank. Were you salty about the cartoony art of Wind Waker? Well, don't worry, according to EGM, they're remaking it in the style of Twilight Princess's art. Of course not, because this was an April Fool's joke. The Zelda cycle. Maybe not as prolific as the Sonic cycle, but this is definitely a thing. When a new Zelda releases, they generally get good critical and commercial acclaim. However, some think the latest title isn't as good as the previous title. Then time passes and that title is regarded as a classic, and this definitely started with Majora's Mask, which always had fans but wasn't the sacred cow it is now. Same thing happened with Wind Waker, same thing happened with Twilight Princess. All of those games had criticisms at or near launch, but all 3 years later are now seen as fantastic titles, with flaws but are all seen as great. Aonuma-san even noted this phenomenon in an interview. The Tingle games. While Americans hate Tingle, Japan liked the bastard enough and he got 2 games on the DS. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land is an adventure game, and Ripened Tingle's Balloon Trip of Love is the sequel. Nintendo asked America if they wanted either game, but the response was a loud no. Both games did get localized in Europe, however. There was a collection that did have both games in it, and there hasn't been a standalone Tingle game since. Sheik's gender. Zelda is Sheik, spoiler alert. For a lot of people, Sheik's gender is very ambiguous. Sheik's body is slender, and with their face wrapped up, it's hard to say if Sheik looks like a boy or a girl. And that's fair enough. Zelda is supposed to be in disguise, and if her Sheik persona showed too much of Zelda's body or features, that would kind of blow the cover. And if Sheik saved you from a fire or from your village freezing over, you'd probably think Sheik as a boy at a glance. However, underneath the wrappings and skin-tight latex lies a woman, hopefully beautiful, unless it's Mole City underneath that mask. Ben Drowned. This was a creepypasta where someone got a copy of Majora's Mask, and it was cursed! And things got weird from there. I never got into creepypastas, but I do know that Ben Drowned, along with Jeff the Killer and Slendy Man, are some of the most popular ones. I do not miss this time in internet history, by the way. Ura Zelda. This was supposed to be an expansion to Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64 disk drive, which would have added new features and dungeons. It sounded ambitious, but due to the 64DD being a bit of a bomb, it didn't come to be. It's said that Master Quest is what Ura Zelda ended up being, but given the other stuff that was supposed to be in Ura Zelda that wasn't in Master Quest, the original Ura Zelda will probably never see the light of day. Twilight Princess Sheik. In Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the Zelda characters used their Twilight Princess designs. Sheik didn't appear in Twilight Princess, so what to do? Well, one of the artists behind TP made art for Sheik. Originally, it was said that Sheik was going to be in TP, but didn't make the cut. With that said, it's also been hinted that the Sheik concept art was made just for Smash. Excuse me, princess. The legendary quote from the Zelda cartoon. This was Link's catchphrase, and he would say it constantly. Easily the best part of the cartoon. Zelda 1 Second Quest. When you clear Zelda 1 and start a new file and name it Zelda, you get access to the second quest, which increases the difficulty and changes the dungeons around. You could also do a second quest in Zelda 2 and Wind Waker. Robin Williams was a Zelda fan. Famed actor Robin Williams was a huge Zelda fan, even naming his daughter Zelda and appearing in a few promotions with Nintendo. Nintendo would pay tribute to the late Robin Williams by having an NPC in Breath of the Wild modeled after him. I am Error. This bastard is named Error. Yes, his name is actually Error. This meme is as old as time. It's actually a pun, as there's another NPC named Bugu, which is the romanized word for bug in Japanese. But that didn't get translated, so Error remains. Zelda is not Link's sister. The Japanese version of A Link to the Past is written to the effect of, "You are Zelda's final hope." The translation team didn't quite get the memo and translated it as "Zelda is your" in English. It's easy to fill in sister there, but no. This was fixed in later ports of A Link to the Past. The Water Temple. Possibly the most infamous dungeon in all of Zelda. The Water Temple is known for being very difficult. It isn't that hard, but it can get confusing to manage the water levels, and the path to go next is never clear. Not helping is having to pause the menu all the time to equip the iron boots, which is something that Aonuma-san hated. Aonuma has apologized about the Water Temple's difficulty, and made it a point of Ocarina of Time 3D to make the temple easier. Dark Link. One of the most mysterious but beloved characters in Zelda, Dark Link. He only appears in Zelda 2 and in Ocarina of Time. Not much is known about him. Is it Link's dark side personified? Some other kind of monster that mimics whoever it faces? Regardless, it is a memorable boss and provides a sizable challenge in either game. That said, in the Yu Mishozaki comic, it's shown that Dark Link is Ganon. Regional differences. A handful of games in the Zelda series have had regional differences between Japan and the rest of the world, most notably in Link's Awakening, where there's a little bit of implied nudity and you getting a bra as an item to give to a mermaid. This was altered in the international release and the remake on the Switch. One interesting example is in Zelda 2, which changes some of the boss and enemy difficulty and also reworks the experience. In the Famicom version, each trait had the same experience requirement, aka level 1 is 50 points, level 2 is 100. In the NES version, each trait like magic and health had their own differing point requirements. Monolith helped with Breath of the Wild. Nintendo bought Monolith from Namco and has become one of their most valued second parties. Besides the Xenoblade games, they help out with other Nintendo titles, most notably Breath of the Wild. It really shows with the wide open sandbox nature of that title. This actually affected Xenoblade Chronicles 2's development, as that title didn't have as many hands on deck to polish that game. It doesn't show that much in the final product, but it did have some technical issues at launch that might have been ironed out if they had everyone on deck to focus on Xenoblade 2. Mario and Zelda crossovers. Zelda and Mario are two of Nintendo's biggest franchises, and they have a lot of commonalities. It's common to see each franchise reference each other, such as the Mario paintings, Ingo and Talon in Ocarina, and Link has appeared in Mario RPG and in Donkey Kong Country 2, and having a special mode in Super Mario Maker 2. Both series reference each other a lot, and it would take a hot minute just to list every cameo each franchise has had with each other, and I would definitely get some comments saying, "Duh, you missed this game." Ocarina and Mario 64. Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64 have a lot in common. Both were developed at the same time, and Ocarina originally used the same engine as Super Mario 64. That's why that L is real texture still appears in Ocarina. In fact, Ocarina was planned to be like Mario 64, with a smaller environment with Link jumping into paintings. The Phantom Ganon fight is a callback to that part in development. Satori. Former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata passed away in 2015 during the production of the Switch and Breath of the Wild. As tributes to the late Iwata, there is Satori Mountain, where you can find the Lord of the Mountain. There's also the NPC Bordrick, who lets you know about Satori Mountain, a heartwarming tribute to the late president. Sonic Lost World DLC. 2013's Sonic Lost World was made as a part of a deal between Sega and Nintendo to get some Sonic games on the Wii U. Lost World is actually a pretty damn good game and got Nintendo DLC, with a Yoshi level and a Zelda level. The Zelda level is cool because Sonic dresses as Link and it's full of little gags that show that Sonic Team did their research. It also shows how Sonic could work in an open world environment. Sadly, due to the mixed reception of Sonic Lost World, Sega went to pursue this style of Sonic in future titles, and the Zelda and Yoshi DLC will be stuck on the Wii U. Seriously, give Sonic Lost World a try, it's a fantastic title. Other Zelda crossovers. Zelda has appeared in a handful of other games, such as Ganondorf being in the Switch port of Diablo 3, Link's gear being in the Switch port of Skyrim jobs, and I think there was Zelda gear in one of the Monster Hunter games. Link to the Past from Shotaro Ishinomori. Shotaro Ishinomori is a legendary mangaka behind works such as Cyborg 009, Kamen Rider, Kikaider, and 0091, which is so horny I might have to do a video on it. Before Ishinomori's passing, he did a manga for A Link to the Past for Nintendo Power. Weirdly enough, despite Ishinomori obviously being Japanese, his manga wasn't officially released in Japan. Akira Himekawa manga. Manga duo Akira Himekawa have done several manga adaptations of various Zelda titles. Unlike Ishinomori's manga, which wasn't released in Japan, the Himekawa mangas were stuck in Japan until Viz Media brought them over to the United States. They have nice art and do follow the stories with some creative liberties. Valiant Comics. In 1990, American comic book company Valiant made their own short line of Zelda comics. It only lasted 5 issues and was printed in their Nintendo Comics system, Satellaview Games. The Satellaview was an add-on for the Super Famicom that allowed you to play games that were broadcasted to it at certain times. Imagine having to change your whole schedule around just to play Shigesato Itoi Bass Fishing. Basically, it was Nintendo's version of the Sega Channel, but it never released outside of Japan. There were 3 Zelda titles broadcasted to the Satellaview, all called BS Zelda. BS Zelda was a remake of Zelda 1 for the Super Famicom where you can play as a boy or a girl. Ancient Stone Tablets was a sequel to A Link to the Past. Finally, Triforce of the Gods was a broadcast port of A Link to the Past, which was kind of redundant, because you could just get a cartridge version that you could play at any time instead of having to cancel your date with the escort just to play Zelda. Funnily enough, Triforce of the Gods was distributed by Saint Giga instead of Nintendo. All of the BS Zelda titles have been archived. It would be really cool if Nintendo brought these back in some sort of collection. The R-Wing. Star Fox crew, you're in the wrong game! The R-Wing was an unused enemy, and it was used to test the flight patterns of Volvalgia. The Running Man. In Ocarina, you can meet this dude called the Running Man who will challenge Link to a race. Try as hard as you can, but you will never beat him. In the text dump, there is no dialogue if you were to beat him. There were plans for Ura Zelda to have him beatable, but that never happened. It seems like the Running Man changed games after Ocarina, as he was in Super Mario Sunshine as Il Piantissimo, using an Ocarina of Time texture as his face, but it's obscured by his mask. I think my anxiety came from Mario Sunshine, as I'm afraid to talk to new people if they might be a chuckster, and if they are a chuckster, I'll get yeeted into the next dimension. Song of Storms Paradox. In Ocarina, you learn the Song of Storms from this creepy dude in the windmill as an adult. That's okay, but he says he learned it from a youth who played it before and ruined the windmill, and that youth was Link himself. However, at that point in the game, you only just learn the Song of Storms and go back to the past to play the shitty games that suck ass. We got a paradox here. Link did something in the past but hasn't done yet, but in the future, he's gone there and he's already done it, so yeah, my brain hurts just thinking about this. Zelda Gaiden. Ocarina of Time was supposed to be for the 64 DD, which was a commercial flop. Despite this, Nintendo was determined to have a follow-up for Zelda on the 64 called Zelda Gaiden, with Eiji Aonuma directing. He only had a year to make Gaiden, which was something Aonuma held himself to. We ended up getting Majora's Mask as the follow-up to Ocarina of Time, and we'll likely never see the original version of Zelda Gaiden. Pole's voice. In the manual for Zelda 1, it says that the poles can be killed by a loud noise, which just confused players. On the Famicom, the second controller had a microphone, so if you made a noise into the mic, it would kill the poles. The NES lacks the microphone, which is why this confused players. Ice Palace Skip. The Ice Palace is probably the most difficult part of A Link to the Past, thanks to the slippery environment and tricky puzzles. One puzzle in particular is pretty bad, as you have to go through a bunch of rooms to do it, but if you go to the Misery Mire first and get the item from that dungeon, you can trivialize the puzzle, so it's assumed that most people do them out of order, and Nintendo changed the puzzle in the GBA port of A Link to the Past. Pink-haired Link. Link was portrayed as a brunette in the earliest games and a blonde for everything else. The one exception is A Link to the Past, where he's pink in-game, but he's shown as a blonde in the manual. So why is he pink-haired in the game? A theory I read online is that Link turns into a pink bunny in the Dark World, and due to color palette limitations, his hair shows as pink on his sprite. Then again, the pink isn't the same for his hair and on his bunny form, so what's the deal here? Wii U Gamepad. Breath of the Wild was developed for the Wii U exclusively at first, and the Wii U gamepad was heavily integrated into the game. There is a reason why the Sheikah Slate looks like a gamepad. When it was decided that the title was going to be a launch title for the Switch, the gamepad mechanics were scrapped. Apparently, it really smoothed out the gameplay, which is good because Zelda didn't need another controller gimmick again. Four Swords Anniversary Edition. Four Swords got an edition on the DSiWare, which added new content to the title, but the catch was it was only available for a limited time. Then in 2014, to promote A Link Between Worlds, Four Swords was up again for free on the 3DS, but only for a couple of days. I don't know why, but I have it here. I guess this makes it the rarest Zelda game. Legend 1985. For the longest time, you hear people online say that Zelda was inspired by the 1985 movie starring Tom Cruise and Tim Curry, and having music done by Tangerine Dream. Legend. It's weird as that movie has a lot in common with Zelda, which was released a year later in Japan. It involves a youth clad in green getting help from fairies to explore a forest and an underground temple to fight demons and save a princess. Miyamoto hasn't said anything about Legend, but I really doubt they took any influence from the movie. Morshu the Rap God. Right before the world went to hell, for some reason Morshu, the shopkeep from one of the CDI games, went viral for being a rapper, using the Thanos beatbox from cartoon beatbox battles. It went so viral that Morshu is now called an artist on Google. Ganon's Red Blood. In the original version of Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf coughed up red blood when you defeated him. It was altered to green blood in later versions of the title, but it just makes it look like Ganondorf coughed up boogers. Original Fire Temple music. Also in that first version of Ocarina, the Fire Temple had music that had Arabic chanting in it. It sounded cool, but due to backlash from the Muslim community, Nintendo altered it in later versions. Top Secret Room. If you glitch A Link to the Past, you'll find the Chris Houlihan room. He got the room from a Nintendo Power Contest. The IGN movie. Yes, this was an April Fool's joke and it belonged here. Incidentally, on IMDb, there was once a fake posting for a Zelda movie that had Richard Simmons, Reggie Fils-Aimé, and 50 Cent in it. That sounds insane, but after the casting for the Mario Bros. Movie, this doesn't seem so far-fetched. That said, nothing will ever top 50 Cent's role in Soul Plane 2, The Blackjacking.
Air Marshal 50 Cent, you're so brave to sacrifice yourself to save us.
Let me bit you.
Obtainable Triforce and the Unicorn Fountain. Ocarina had a very lengthy development cycle, and to the surprise of no one, a lot of things changed during development. In pre-release screens, it looked like Link could get the Triforce as an item similar to previous titles. But due to changes in the plot, this can't happen, but there were plenty of hoaxes about it. Also shown in early screens was this fountain called the Unicorn Fountain, where it has been speculated that you would have gotten the Triforce from here. Again, hoaxes of the thing being in the final product weren't uncommon. One thing I read online is that this thing was going to be hidden in a difficult to get to alcove in Zora's fountain that would have been home to the fountain. But in the final product, nothing is in the alcove, and you can't get there anyway as the Zora's domain is frozen over. Origin behind Link's name. Miyamoto envisioned the Triforce as computer chips, and Link would travel between the past and the future to gather them. A link to the past, if you will. Even though the time travel concept was scrapped, Link maintained his name as he linked the player to the game. As a bonus, Link's in German means left, and Link is usually a lefty. Futuristic Link to the Past. For a game with the word past in the title, there isn't actually any time travel in A Link to the Past. Well, it would have, as Miyamoto thought about revisiting the futuristic concept for the Super Nintendo title. There is some concept art for a futuristic Zelda. Ice and Wind Temples. Two known cut dungeons from Ocarina of Time are the Ice and Wind Temples, which would have been in the original version of Ocarina for the disc drive, but when the game was moved to cartridge, these two dungeons were cut. Remnants can be found in the final product, with the Ice dungeon being a mini dungeon to get the Iron Boots, and the Water and Forest Temple parts in Ganon's castle having Ice and Wind themes respectively. Link and Zelda's relationship. Link and Zelda are often shipped together in fan works, but rarely in the games do they show any attraction to each other. Like in Ocarina of Time, they briefly meet before being separated, and in Twilight Princess, Zelda has the personality of a cardboard cutout. The closest the two have come to being an item have been in Skyward Sword, but even still there's nothing explicit shown between the two. Breath of the Wild also makes the case for Zelda and Link being a couple, but Link being put into a coma for 100 years and Zelda being stuck in spirit form while Link fucks off kind of threw a wrench in that plan. Ganondorf Dragmire. By way of Nintendo's website, Ganondorf has a last name, and to the surprise of no one, it's cool as shit. Other Zelda comics. Zelda has had smaller one-shot comics. Their canon status is debated, and rarely have they been released in America. Some notable ones include manga from Yu Mishozaki, Kobayashi Susumu, Daisuke Shigoto, Yu Minazuki, Junko Taniguchi, Ataru Kavika, and someone named Oyster. Since they are probably non-canon, Nintendo nor any other publishing company has bothered to localize them. Epona was for Ganon. When you go to Lon Lon Ranch as an adult, Ingo says that he's breeding a horse for Ganon and was planning on presenting Epona for Ganon. Well, Link threw a wrench into those plans as he wins Epona from Ingo. A bit of a surprise too, as Epona was hard to tame and only Malon and Link could tame the horse. Beta Forest. Something curious between Ocarina and Twilight is that in both of their early trailers, they have forests showing where Link would fight and stuff. I'm guessing forests just make for good testing areas. I think some remnants of Twilight's forest can be found in the final product. Inside Fado's house. There is one house in Ordon Village where you can't get into, and that's Fado's. You can try until the cows come home, but no one can get into Fado's house. If you glitch in there, nothing is found inside the house. The dev team just said that they didn't have enough time to make anything for the house. Hookshot chest. Link likes big old titties. Female Link. Not to be confused with Linkle from Hyrule Warriors, a retro Japanese magazine depicted Link as a girl, probably a mistake on their end. It went unknown for years, but was found in 2019, and in 2022, it seemed to take off in popularity. I like that she isn't wearing any pants in any of her art. My kind of woman. Breath of the Wild female Link. I might as well put this here. There were talks of making Link a girl in Breath of the Wild, which would make sense given how feminine Link is in that title, and I'm half right here. They were thinking of making Zelda playable, but that led to an issue of what would Link do if Zelda was the playable hero. As a result, Link became the playable character, as with most Zelda titles. Seems a bit weird, because I think there's a ton of potential in a Zelda-focused game, but I guess we're just stuck with Link as playable forever. The mayor sucks at Zelda. There's no way I wasn't putting this in this iceberg. Space World 2000 tech demo. I remember seeing this video way back in the day and thinking it looked so cool. It was a look at what the GameCube was capable of, and it would have been really sick to see an Ocarina or a follow-up to Ocarina with this art style. But we got Wind Waker instead. While I think Wind Waker looks good and is a solid title, I and many others would have loved to have seen a Zelda title on the GameCube in this style. Wii U tech demo. Much like the above, Zelda also got a tech demo for the Wii U, which also looks really sick. Not much else to say here, but I do think if Zelda was a launch title for the Wii U, that poor bastard of a system would have had a better chance at success. Don't worry Wii U, I still love you, even if you are my Xenoblade Chronicles X machine. That's the best one in the series, by the way. Hackers tried to steal Breath of the Wild at E3. At E3 2016, Breath of the Wild was shown off in a playable build, so naturally people tried to steal it, kind of like what happened with the Simon Y build of Sonic 2. So, how on earth do you expect to steal a demo from a Nintendo booth at E3 where there's hella cameras, people, and staff around? Very poorly. Basically, the hackers tried to use a program to steal the program off the Wii U's, but the Wii U's on the show floor weren't compatible with the program. Despite trying to work the program to get it to work on those Wii U's, there was just way too many people around, and they couldn't successfully hack it without looking sus. Better luck next time, I guess. The rap commercials. In Japan, for A Link to the Past, this was the commercial on TV, and well, it was pretty silly, but it worked because we're still talking about it. They would remake it, kind of, for A Link Between Worlds. Ocarina Wrong Warp. Do you want to clear Ocarina of Time but only have about 15 minutes to spare? Well, use Wrong Warping. With Wrong Warps, you can totally glitch the game and get to the final Ganon fight where you beat him with a stick, which is something I think Spider-Man did in one of the Sam Raimi movies. Breath of the Wild NES build. To show the concept of Breath of the Wild, the dev team made an NES game that showed what direction they wanted to go in for the next title. Nintendo showed it off at GDC. I wish they would release that build as a download game or something, it looks cool. The Legend of Neil. This is a web series made by a partner of Comedy Central called Adam.com that featured a man named Neil who gets transported into Zelda and needs to find a way out of the game. Never seen it, but it exists. At the very least, it has a Wikipedia article. Cory Bunnell, I think I said that name right. One name that stands out in the credits for Breath of the Wild is Cory Bunnell. He aspired to work at Nintendo and put in the work and got the honor of working on one of the biggest Zelda titles ever. Remember kids, put in the work and you can achieve anything. Out. In 2007, Link was voted as the hottest game character of that year by LGBT magazine Out. Well, I can't argue there. He's not moving anymore. Something I didn't know about Ocarina of Time until much later on. If you go in a certain back alley in the town after Zelda escapes with Impa, you'll find a dying guard. Ganondorf's forces totally overwhelmed the Hyrule Guard, and this poor bastard crawled into a back alley for his final moments. You talk to him once, he says some things, and then you talk to him again, he passes away, and no one in the town seems any of the wiser. Imagi's movie pitch. Sometime in 2007, movie studio Imagi made this pitch for a CGI Zelda movie. However, Nintendo rejected this pitch, and the financial flop that was Astro Boy forced Imagi to close their doors in 2010. I wonder if they would have cast Nicolas Cage as Ganon. The IQ Player. To get around China's console import ban, Nintendo made the IQ Player with, well, IQ. It had translated versions of various 64 games. It's a curiosity these days, but it did cause some drama in the speedrunning community, as it was discovered that the text on the IQ version of Ocarina of Time is faster than the English or Japanese versions. Barrier Skip. The holy grail of Wind Waker speedruns. There is a huge barrier that prevents Link from entering Ganon's castle. If you could clear it, you would save up to 2 hours in the any percent category for Wind Waker. In 2017, it was found out how to skip the barrier, but it's super finicky and precise. Ocarina Anti-Piracy. Some 64 games had anti-piracy measures, one of which was Ocarina of Time. If the game knows you're playing on a pirated version, it will do a few things. For one, it will be impossible to catch fish. 2, Zelda will get this weird ass afro. And 3, one gate at the end of Ganon's castle will not open for you. SRM. One of the craziest glitches I've seen in any game. SRM is short for State Reference Manipulation. To briefly put it, allows you to write code in Majora's Mask in Ocarina of Time. It's a very fragile and unstable speedrun, as you have to be very specific and the run is able to crash at any time. However, people grind it out to 100% Ocarina of Time. If you use SRM, you can beat Ocarina of Time in the 5-minute time limit seen in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. The board games. I was hungover one day watching board games and I totally forgot that Zelda had a board game, and they did not translate the game well into board game form. I also found out there's a Japanese version that's far more elaborate and has multiple colored links, and if that orange one was red, it would almost be 4 swords. Legend of Zelda Invasion. This was concept art shown for Breath of the Wild that had some weird pieces of art made for it, showing stuff like aliens, Link in an urban outfit, and Ganondorf wearing a Metallica t-shirt. I guarantee you that his favorite album is the Black Album. Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning are so much better. About the only things used from this art were Link wearing a Switch t-shirt and the motorcycle being unlockable in the Season Pass of Breath of the Wild. New Game Plus. In Breath of the Wild, using a very long and very specific setup, you can start a glitched file where you can bring anything you want into a new file for the game. With this glitch, you can use the light arrows freely, or just skip the Great Plateau entirely. Really cool stuff. The Great Plateau Barrier. One thing that has Breath of the Wild speedrunners stumped is the Great Plateau. There's a barrier around it that doesn't go away until you get the paraglider. While speedrunners did find a way to get off the plateau, it was found out there is another fog barrier outside the immediate area of the plateau that voids Link out if he goes too far. That said, if you use the New Game Plus glitch, you can skip past the fog, as well as bring any items you want with you. Kasuto. In Zelda 2, all of the towns are named after the stages that would later be seen in Ocarina, so there's towns like Naboru or Ruto, and that's fine, but the odd name out is Kasuto. Who this Kasuto is a mystery. Could be a sage that time forgot, another hero that saved the village prior to Link, or maybe it was a bad guy in Ganon's corner. Back in Time. A peculiar glitch that is shared between Wind Waker, Skyward Sword, and Twilight Princess. In all cases, it allows you to play on the title screen, seriously breaking the game and allowing for new speedrun routes. While it's mostly a curiosity in Wind Waker, it's super important for Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess speedruns. Cut Wind Waker dungeons. Wind Waker, like a lot of early GameCube titles, had a fairly rushed development cycle. All things considered, it is a solid game, but it drags near the mid to late game, where you have to grind for rupees to get to the Tingle maps. Aonuma had plans for more dungeons, but due to time constraints, those dungeons were cut. Aonuma thought about bringing them back for the HD release, but opted against it in favor of balancing the Triforce search near the end of the game. The Master Sword has returned to the forest. A really weird line in Breath of the Wild. I think at some point in the development, the Master Sword was going to break like most weapons, but that didn't happen, and presumably this prompt would have appeared when it broke. You can still find it in the game through glitching. Navi Trackers. This is a spin-off for the Wind Waker that was released alongside Four Swords Adventures in Japan and Korea. It's a spin-off, it's fully voiced, and needs the GBA link cable to do the multiplayer mode. All it is a little puzzle game where you can play against your friends and try to collect stamps. It was planned for localization but didn't happen. Mirinda commercial. Similar to that Mario Got Milk commercial, Link starred in a commercial for the orange soda Mirinda. Who likes orange soda? I do, who? There was even a joke online that there exists a build of Ocarina of Time where there is an endless supply of the stuff, and for the record, that does not exist. The Doghouse Glitch. Sometimes called the Kennel Skip, this is a glitch in Link's Awakening where you can glitch into a corrupted underworld and fuck about and glitch the game. When I bought Link's Awakening on the 3DS, I did this right away and I was very confused. Most Zelda games have been delayed. A delayed game might be good, but a bad game is bad forever, is a quote from Shigeru Miyamoto. That must be why the Zelda series is so good, as a chunk of the games, at least on consoles, have seen delays. Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Breath of the Wild are all notorious for seeing delays. That said, Wind Waker and Majora's Mask are exceptions to the rule. I think Nintendo wised up to how often they delay their games, so they've been better about not announcing new games too far out from their release. Not really. Iron Knuckles are Gerudo. In Ocarina, the Iron Knuckle enemies all have Gerudo faces in them, implying that all of them are being brainwashed. This isn't the case, as in the Spirit Temple you fight an Iron Knuckle to reveal it's actually Noboru. The reason why all the Iron Knuckles share the face is due to time constraints, and it being easier just to leave the texture in as you don't see them in normal gameplay. This was addressed in the 3D remake where the Gerudo face texture is gone. Still, it would be an interesting concept to see how Link would feel about killing his fellow Hylians, well, Gerudo, but the point remains. Link and Samus in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. During the development of Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the Wii, the developers proposed Link and Samus to be playable characters. There were either two reasons why they didn't make the cut. The devs showed Nintendo footage of Link and Samus on a PS2 build of the game that upset Nintendo, or the suits said no because they aren't Marvel characters. The former is more likely. Funnily enough, Nintendo would publish their own Marvel Ultimate Alliance game on the Switch in 2019 with Team Ninja of all people developing it. No sign of Link or Samus in the game, however. Hey Marvel, you know what would be really cool? If you did a crossover with Capcom. Just an idea. Breath of the Wild will change Zelda's going forward. Breath of the Wild is a fantastic game, but it's somewhat contentious among Zelda vets for changing the formula from a structured action-adventure title to an open-world game akin to Skyrim or Xenoblade. At the time of making this video, Breath of the Wild is the highest-selling Zelda game, so some are thinking that Zelda games going forward will mimic Breath of the Wild's open-world formula, instead of the classic formula. Probably the reason behind this is that later Zelda titles, particularly Twilight Princess and especially Skyward Sword, were criticized for a lack of exploration, hand-holding, and not really evolving from previous titles. Given the breath of fresh air that Breath of the Wild gave the series, and the critical and commercial success of the title, Nintendo will probably focus on the open world style going forward. That said, Nintendo hasn't left those old fans in the dust, as they released a remake of Link's Awakening on the Switch, and did an HD port of Skyward Sword as well. Breath of the Wild is a soft reboot. Breath of the Wild doesn't have an established point in the timeline. All we know is that it takes place well after the events of every Zelda prior to. I've been thinking that the reason behind this is to give the series a clean slate going forward after making a mess of the timeline with the 3 splits from Ocarina. With a clean slate, Nintendo can do whatever they want and not necessarily have to worry about the timeline. With that said, well, I guess this is minor spoilers for Age of Calamity. Assuming that title is canon, they're going to go back to time travel and alternate universe bullshit, so Nintendo will be back at square one regardless. Twilight Princess Low Percent. One of the most esoteric speedruns ever. When Link shows off an item in Twilight Princess, he moves while standing and can clip through the environment. This is used in low percent speedruns for Twilight, where you stare at rupees for 17 hours just to beat the game with as few stuff as possible. The current record for this category is over 24 hours. Not really a speedrun at that rate. Captain Toad was a Zelda spin-off. During the development of Captain Toad, the developers wanted to find a character that couldn't jump. Originally, they were going to go with Link for the title, but opted for Captain Toad and his big-ass bag that stopped him from jumping.
Swiggity swag, what's in the bag?
Penny Arcade Skyward Sword comic. Near Skyward Sword's release, the artist behind Penny Arcade made a small online comic that would have been found on Nintendo's website. While that page isn't up, it has been archived. Netflix show. Netflix and Nintendo were planning a few adaptations of their IPs. There was a Zelda and a Star Fox show planned, but due to a break in the NDA, Nintendo canceled those plans. Don't fuck with Nintendo and NDAs. Jim Sterling called Agatha for Hyrule Warriors. This still has to be the hardest read in gaming. Extinct species. Zelda has had quite a bit of non-humanoid species throughout the franchise, such as the Zora and the Goron. While some species have been around for most of the games, such as the aforementioned Zora and Goron, some have changed throughout the years, such as the Kokiri going from humanoids to leaf people. Some species, such as the Minish, have been confirmed to have been wiped out. And for the record, I'm glad those Kikwi motherfuckers went the way of the dodo, old testicle-looking bastards. Capcom threatened Nintendo. Capcom, more specifically Yoshiki Okamoto, wanted to remake Zelda 1 for the Game Boy. When they approached Nintendo to do so, Nintendo and Miyamoto weren't interested. Okamoto threatened Miyamoto in retaliation, saying that Capcom will make their own Zelda, with blackjack and hookers. Nintendo quickly changed their tune and got to talking with Capcom to make some Zelda titles for the handhelds. While the remake didn't happen, it did lead to the Oracle games and a few other handheld titles made by Capcom. Link, he come to town. I remember this song from Flash Revolution. That was my shit back in 6th grade. One song was called The Legend of Zelda, which many people thought was from System of a Down, but no. The song is called Zelda from an artist named Joe Plyman for an album called The Rabbit Joint. People really got this shit confused for System? Really? Hell, when I looked up Joe Plyman on Spotify, I got System of a Down and August Burns Red. At any rate, Chavo and John cleared the air and never performed the song, but did recommend the games. As for August Burns Red, they did a really good Zelda cover. The Happy Mask Salesman was based off of Miyamoto. I can kind of see it. Nazi symbol in Zelda 1. Dungeon 3 in Zelda 1 takes the shape of a manji, which is a symbol in Buddhism and other religions. If you visit Japan, you'll see the symbol on temples and shrines. It's still associated with religion in Japan and Asia, but the West associates the symbol with, well, Nazism. Given that Zelda 1 was developed in Japan, they probably meant to convey the Eastern meaning of the manji rather than the West association with Nazism. Even when I was making this iceberg, people in Discord kept calling it the Nazi dungeon, but no, it's a manji. LCD games. There's been a few LCD games for Zelda, including the Game & Watch games, the Game Watch series, which was an LCD wrist game, and that Zelda 1 clock Nintendo did for Zelda's 35th anniversary. Granted, it was an LCD game, but worth mentioning. Most LCD games are a novelty, but fun to note nonetheless. First person Ocarina of Time. An idea thrown around for Ocarina was the game being played in first person. However, the person who modeled Link wasn't happy with the idea of not being able to see Link the whole time. And that said, you do go into a first person mode when using some of the items. It should also be noted that Yoshiaki Koizumi's wife asked for Link to be more attractive, a request that he happily honored. Dating sim elements. You ever notice that in Ocarina there are a lot of plot important female characters? Well, Link was going to be a playboy and be able to romance the lovely ladies of Hyrule with dating sim elements. However, due to plot developments, most girls would be unavailable to Link, so the dating sim elements were dropped. It's been implied but not outright stated that Link shacks up with Malon after the events of Ocarina. Probably a better call than getting sodomized by a rock-hard Goron cock or having to jizz on Zora eggs at any rate. Zelda 3. This was a hoax. Someone on eBay had a cartridge for sale called Zelda 3, which was an alleged prototype of a third Zelda game on the NES. After a lot of attention, it was proven to be fake as shit. That said, an actual Zelda 3 was planned at some point and would have leaned into more RPG elements and would have had multiple party members, but that Zelda 3 was scrapped. Ubisoft's Wind Waker sequel, and Ubisoft dev, Davide Soliani, was hugely enamored with Zelda and Wind Waker and wanted to make a sequel for the GBA. He went out of his way to meet Miyamoto and pitch a GBA sequel of the Wind Waker, but they never actually showed it to Nintendo as Ubisoft killed the pitch. There is a single image of this pitch that remains. Zelda Valley of the Flood. Sometimes in the 2000s, this art and logo popped up with a unique description, a Zelda title that was set before Wind Waker, where a fake hero has to rise up in a futile attempt to stop Ganon. It would have boasted a unique steampunk style. Sounds like a promising game, but much like a soapland, prostitutes, orgasms, Valley of the Flood was fake as shit. Shame, as a Zelda title where you play as a fake chosen hero has serious potential. Retro's Zelda spin-off. Sammy Hall, a former Retro employee, uploaded some art for a Sheik-focused spin-off. The art looks really cool and something that I think would have made for an interesting game. It was only prepared internally at Retro, but never left pre-production. After the art was uploaded, either Retro or Nintendo Ninjas must have gone after Hall, as all of his stuff got pulled down. There have been talks for a Sheik-focused spin-off, but nothing has come to the surface on that front. Mario Adventure. Early design documents for Zelda 1 show that it was called Mario Adventure. Obviously this didn't stick and Zelda became its own thing. Original Zelda theme. Composer Koji Kondo was composing the music for Zelda 1 and wanted to use Maurice Ravel's Bolero as the title theme. A law in Japan says that 50 years after a composer's death, their music enters the public domain. However, Ravel hadn't been dead for 50 years by the time Zelda 1 was releasing, so Kondo had to make a new song for the intro on short notice. He changed Bolero a bit, and now that's the iconic Zelda theme. Legend of Zelda: Hero of Time. Look, there's a ton of Zelda fan movies and animations out there, and those are fine and dandy, but I want to point out this one. The Hero of Time had a ton of effort put into it, which is impressive given that no one would be able to profit off of this movie. Fan movies and games can be good, since they aren't restricted by internal mandates or executive red tape, but they are limited by budget, market reach, and the fact that lawyers can come knocking at any point. Still, good job to the crew behind Hero of Time for making a fairly impressive fan movie. Link to the Past cartoon. Apathy Industries have made a formal pitch to Nintendo to make a Link to the Past cartoon, but Nintendo wasn't interested. They have done fan animations though. Third Oracle game. There are 2 Oracle games, Seasons and Ages. There was to be a third game in the series, however getting 3 games to work together proved to be too much of a pain, and it was decided that the Oracle games would only be 2 titles. Christianity in Zelda. Zelda did have a bit more overt references to Christianity in the early titles, with a book being called a Bible, and Link's shield having a cross on it. Due to not wanting to piss off Guardians, the Christian references were cut from later installments. Some other religious references included the original name for A Link to the Past being Triforce of the Gods, and the mirror shield in Ocarina having a crescent moon design that looks very similar to the symbol of Islam. That was edited out of later releases of Ocarina of Time. Cancel 25th Anniversary Project. There was supposed to be a bigger celebration for Zelda's 25th anniversary. One rumor says that there was going to be a collection with Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Four Swords Adventures. While Wind Waker and Twilight Princess eventually got remakes, Four Swords wasn't so lucky. Super Nintendo Zelda 2 Remake. The Zelda 2 is one game that Miyamoto regrets. He wanted to remake it for the Super Nintendo, but that didn't happen. There were some sprites made for it, so I'm guessing they didn't get too far into making Zelda 2 for the Super Famicom. They did remake Zelda 1 for the Satellaview, so maybe this could have happened next. Inti Creates Zelda 2 Remake. Inti Creates have breathed new life into old franchises such as Blaster Master, and one dream project for the studio is Zelda 2. As of the making of this video, nothing has been said on this front, but given the chance, Inti would totally do it. Wind Waker, Four Swords, and Twilight Princess sequels. All of these titles had sequels planned for them at different points. Aonuma was planning a true sequel to the Wind Waker on consoles, but due to the weaker sales of Wind Waker and the controversial art design change, they opted to scrap the Wind Waker sequel in favor of Twilight Princess. That said, Phantom Hourglass does follow the events of Wind Waker, and Spirit Tracks would take place in that timeline. Four Swords was considered to have a DS port, which would have been a better idea, but all we got was a digital port for the DSi and 3DS, and both of those are lost to time. Twilight Princess, for its part, was going to have a Majora's Mask style sequel, but Miyamoto went for a smaller title with Link's crossbow training. All things considered, it is a fun little game, but it could have been so much more, and I can imagine the team behind crossbow training was let down, and that title was also going to get a sequel, but Aonuma was told to focus on the DS games. Ocarina Link is Arusu's descendant. At the end of Dragon Quest III, the legendary hero Arusu, or Erdrick, travels to parts unknown. Somehow he ended up settling in Hyrule where he would have kids. Eventually, one of those descendants would be the hero of time, Link, who is destined to defeat Ganondorf. Not really, but I just wanted to point out that Arusu in Smash Ultimate and Ocarina of Time Link share the same voice actor, Nobuyuki Hiyama. I wonder if that was a deliberate casting choice. You know what other Zelda character Hiyama voiced? Aw yeah, it's all coming together. The gap between dimensions. After you shove a boot up a Phantom Ganon's ass, Ganondorf gets really salty and banishes the Phantom to quote, the gap between dimensions. This phrase has bamboozled players for the longest time. Playing other games like A Link to the Past or A Link Between Worlds shows that there is a transitional screen when you change between worlds. This is more apparent in A Link Between Worlds, so my guess is Phantom Ganon got banished here. This doesn't seem so bad. Better than Artesia, New Mexico at any rate. Twilight Princess 3D. At a European Zelda concert, people who checked their street passes found a user playing a game called Twilight Princess 3D. Those who checked out the title were banned, as the game was fake. So basically, someone hacked their 3DS to show a game that doesn't exist and got a bunch of people banned for checking out a game that they thought exists. Why? To be a giant asshole. Majora's Mask is the 5 stages of grief. This is one of the most popular fan theories for Majora's Mask. There's 5 major regions in Majora, and each represents one of the 5 stages of loss. Everyone deals with loss differently, and each region's stage of grief is different. For example, the Clock Tower represents denial, anger is represented by the Deku Dudes, Gorons represent bargaining, the Zoras represent DD depression, and Ikana Valley represents acceptance. I'm skipping over a lot of the finer points, but that's the gist of it. When I revisit the game with this thought in mind, I can kind of see it. I'm not sure if that was intentional on the developer or localization side, but it's funny how it lines up. Link is dead in Majora's Mask. The most cliche of fan theories, the protagonist is dead. Not really. The gist of it is, when Zelda sends Link back to his youth after the events of Ocarina of Time, he encounters Skull Kid and gets killed. And that's why Termina is populated by reused assets from Ocarina. Link is stuck in purgatory, and getting met with, quote, a terrible fate is referring to Link dying, not being turned into a Deku scrub. Also, in Twilight Princess, it's stated that the hero's shade is Ocarina Link, and Twilight Princess does follow Majora's Mask in the official timeline. I personally don't buy it, and it seems like a lot of people are sick of this theory because of Game Theory's video, which popularized the theory and is sitting at 15 million views. I hope people realize Link is just a normal dude and would have died eventually. I had to watch a Game Theory video for this entry for Christ's sake. To me, Game Theory's peaked after the Silent Hill circumcision. 4th piece of the Triforce. Yes, because a triangle fits perfectly into the middle of the Triforce, and there's a 4th triangle on Link's shield. Obviously, there must be a 4th piece of the Triforce, right? No! If there was a 4th piece, it would have been called the Quad Force, which sounds like some really bad mid-2000s movie that would have starred Stone Cold Steve Austin and Jason Statham. Tingle horror game. Vanpool, the developers behind the 3DS game Dylan Rollin' Western, prior to making that game, they were planning a Tingle horror game. Not much else is known about it, other than it would have starred Tingle. I can see it as a game kind of like Alien Isolation, where you're just running away from Tingle and not buying his overpriced maps. Skyward Sword's bizarre geography. Okay, this one is a personal mystery of mine. Skyward Sword is broken up into 4 areas, with Skyloft above the clouds and the 3 areas hidden beneath them. That's fine and dandy, but how does this work? The people of Skyloft can't see the land of Hyrule below, but there is still sunlight on the ground below. Even if the people on Skyloft can't make out specifics, they should be able to see that there is at least something beneath there, and if the clouds were that thick that they couldn't see beneath them, then how would sunlight and vegetation be on the ground? How does this work? At least in Skies of Arcadia, they established that an air pressure death lies below the clouds. Maybe it's the power of the 3 goddesses that keeps the surface livable, or maybe there's an easier explanation.
They were rescued by, let's say, Mo.
Unknown canceled the Zelda titles. A sad truth about gaming, hell, entertainment as a whole, is that there are a ton of canceled projects that we'll never know about. We're lucky to hear about titles such as the GBA Wind Waker sequel or the 3rd Oracle game. Who knows what other games have been pitched to or within Nintendo but we haven't heard about due to legal issues or things getting lost to time. Hyrule Warriors converges the timelines. Hyrule Warriors is a crossover between the various Zelda titles made by Omega Force. It's a great game and loaded with fan service. While considered non-canon, it does provide an interesting idea of having the 3 timelines converge into one game, and that would make for a convenient option for the timelines to unite before Breath of the Wild starts things over again. But due to Hyrule Warriors' non-canon status, it's unknown how or even if the timelines will even converge. Ocarina is about the loss of innocence. One thing about Ocarina of Time is how open to interpretation it is. For me, when I hear that every copy of Zelda is personalized, I take that as how people interpret the events of Ocarina of Time. For me, the tale of Ocarina is about the loss of innocence. You start out as a boy in a protected forest, but quickly gets thrown out into the world, surviving on his own, and having to deal with things like death and destruction with barely any guidance. That's all of us. We all have to leave the safety of our homes at some point to face the world, meeting people both good and bad, losing people who are close to us, and being put into situations both small and grand. And no matter what happens, us and Link got to pick ourselves up, find solutions, and push forward. Regardless of what's happening in your life right now, I'm proud of you. I am also proud of you for making it to the end of the video, and that is the Zelda Iceberg Explained. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said in the intro, I am a huge Legend of Zelda fan. I've played the series forever now, and I've been wanting to do a Zelda Iceberg for this channel for a minute now. But the ones I found online for the series have only been about a specific game, like say Ocarina or Majora's, or are only related to fan theories, which I don't find terribly interesting. So I did my homework, I did as much research on the series as I could, and I found some pretty interesting stuff about Zelda, so I hope you learned something new about Zelda today. I also have to give up to Nintendo for keeping such good control over the series since its inception. Like, I didn't have to talk about such weird things as I've had to do in previous Iceberg videos. Like, in this video I didn't have to talk about, say, someone who got arrested for incest. I didn't have to talk about a sex doll with real bones in it. I didn't have to talk about a Tails scat comic. No, everything here was pretty basic in my opinion. But those are just my thoughts on this Iceberg, and I think I'll just leave it at that. So hit me some buttons. What's your favorite Zelda game, and what icebergs should I cover in the future? And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell as well for notifications on future videos. Hit me up on the social media such as Twitter, Instagram, at ZMangs. Also hit me up on the Discord too, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright everybody, take care.